Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to take a look at the Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat. This is really only the second American car we've ever reviewed on the series, with the first being the Camaro Z28, which is more of a muscle car turned track beast. But this Charger with 707 horsepower in a rear-wheel drive chassis is pure muscle. So let's talk about this crazy thing. The name Hellcat comes from the engine, Chrysler's supercharged V8 6.2-liter Hemi called, well, the Hellcat. This engine only lives in 3 cars currently, the Charger Hellcat, Challenger Hellcat, and somewhat amazingly, the Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk. Yes, if you ever see a Grand Cherokee driving down the road, it might have over 700 horsepower. Since the Hellcat's release, only one faster muscle car engine has been produced, the 6.2 Demon, which lives in, of course, the Challenger SRT Demon. But bringing it back to the Charger, this is of course a car with a huge history. Starting all the way back in the 60s with pretty rough initial sales, the Charger eventually made a name for itself in the formative years of the muscle car era, and is now a premium choice if you're looking for big power on a budget. This SRT Hellcat embodies its muscle car roots more than many others these days, so let's see what modern muscle is all about and take the Charger out for a test drive. Now, it's winter in-game currently, which I feel just gives the Charger an unfair disadvantage for the initial test drive, so we're going to break car review format a bit here and take the Charger and do a custom summer race where I'll just hop off the race course to do some open world driving. And first things first, we'll listen to the engine. Yeah, it's alright. It's got that guttural modern muscle tone, you can hear the supercharger whine, especially at low RPMs, and overall it's pretty fitting for Horizon standards. Now for how the Charger drives, this car is heavy. It weighs over 4,500 pounds and you can feel it. The ride height is fairly high and the springs feel soft, at least for this weight, so I'm hoping some stiffer, lower suspension can rein in that rear end a bit. But with this much power, I think it's going to be tough to manage this car. But hey, always up for a challenge, and I'm excited to see what we can do with it. Let's head into the shop and take a look at what's on offer. Starting off with the tires, it does look like we just get the street compound stock, but that gives us plenty of room to upgrade in the future if we need to, especially if I'm going to be pushing into S1, and it explains our lack of grip. Also, I want to check out the tire widths because it does look like we can fit some really meaty rear tires. And happily, we also get wheel spacing options, some really aggressive ones too, at least in the front. So happy to see that. And then moving into aero, not quite as happy to see what we have here. It's just the Forza front splitter, which I don't really think looks that good, especially with that big red tow hook. And the Forza rear wing, which I actually think looks terrible for this car. It's just not fitting. At least though we do get a wingless option, which I always like to see. And then finally, to check out conversions, you don't get any engine swap options for good reason. The Hellcat is an insane engine anyway, but you do get an all-wheel drive swap option, which makes a little more sense than normal. You can get Chargers in all-wheel drive, but I don't think you can get the Hellcat in all-wheel drive. Either way, makes a little bit more sense than it normally does in some rear-wheel cars. Alright, so since the Charger is sitting in the upper end of A-Class, I do want to make an A-Class tune for it to start off. I love working with limited PI and seeing just how much performance can be squeezed out of a few points. So let's start there, and I'll be back in a second. And here we are with an A-Class road tune for the Charger Hellcat, pushing just over stock power at 715 horsepower, weighing a little bit lighter at 4,420 pounds, and now equipped with much better suspension to handle the weight and power. This build is still running stock tire compound, but they are a little bit wider, especially in front, to help with cornering ability. And overall, the goal here was to get as much suspension upgrades as we could and try to pull out at least a little bit of weight. So it weighs, I think, about 150 pounds less than stock, makes a little bit more power with the oil and cooling upgrade, but we've got race suspension, ARBs, better transmission and drive shaft, lots of little upgrades to complement the insane power that this car already has. And that all means this build still retains a lot of muscle car feel to it, but it's at least manageable around my test track. So let's talk about how it drives. Obviously, with the lower, stiffer suspension, it's a lot more predictable. There's so much less body roll, which is really helpful, and surprisingly, the power band is more manageable than I thought. Because it's a supercharged engine and not turbocharged, the power band is a lot smoother, there's no steep spikes. So although, especially in first and second gear, you can definitely get the tail out, once you're kind of mid-second gear into third gear and in some higher speeds, it's actually pretty stable and pretty grippy. Now you can definitely still feel the weight here. I mean, this car weighs twice that of some of the other cars I've reviewed, so cornering is still a bit of a delicate business, and since there's no aero adjustment, we don't have any extra help there. So being smooth and mindful of your weight shift and weight balance when you're driving this car is key for this build. And finally, before we get to the lap time, I've got to say that this car's power band is so fun for A-Class because you have to be pretty careful with the throttle, especially on this test track with all the hairpins, but when you do get to open it up and go full throttle, you can really feel that power surge. It's pretty fun. So let's get into the lap time. We don't have too much to compare to here. I mean, maybe the Kia Stinger, they're both kind of heavy sedans, but the Hellcat has something like 300 more horsepower and is even heavier still, so I'm curious to see where it's gonna sit. So the Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat did the lap in 2:36.399. That's not too bad. I was definitely not expecting this to end up towards the top, so somewhere kind of right in the middle feels appropriate. Even though this car has the most power out of anything we've reviewed in A-Class, it just didn't have the grip and it's so heavy. Now I did make an S1 build for the Charger as well, so we're going to touch on that one super quick and then get into the Hokey score. For the S1 build, we pretty much just did the obvious, upgrading the tires to a race compound, reducing the weight by I think around 1,000 pounds, and adding some extra power. But the result was just not something I was happy with. Without resorting to Forza aero, this car just remains a pretty heavy, overpowered rear-wheel drive car that doesn't have that much grip. I was able to squeeze out a time in the 220 range towards the bottom of our other S1 review cars, but I just didn't have fun driving the car. To get this car to a place I'd be happy with it, you have to resort to some Forza physics and kind of break the standard I have on this series of going towards more realistic builds that would make some more sense in real life. So I kind of scrapped this build, went back to my A-Class build, which I was pretty happy with, and now let's get to the Hokey score. And things aren't looking too great here, especially in the competitive section. Let's pick out a few scores. I did talk originally about how I liked the sound, but to be honest, the more I drove the car, the less it appealed to me. It just felt a little bit more robotic as time went on. On the competitive side of things, the Charger just struggles to find its place. It's too heavy and not nimble enough for drag, rally, and drift. And you saw that it definitely performed alright at race, but it's a challenge to drive and easy to make mistakes. This also means that it's just not a top choice for any online racing. Now let's move to the right side of the board. Our flexibility score is pretty low here at a 3.6 because of that low customization score, and it's across the board pretty low competitive scores. Now for the style bonus though, I'm giving it a +3. Living in the Midwestern United States, I see muscle cars all the time. Base model Chargers are a dime a dozen. But with that said, I think muscle cars over the past 10 or so years have really stepped up their style game, and Chargers look pretty good. I've only seen a few Hellcats ever on the road, but they definitely have a presence when they roll by. And this all leads us to a final score for the Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat of 43.6. Sadly, this does place it at the bottom of our Hokey score leaderboard. The car just struggles to find its place in competitive or fun driving for Forza. Now, if you like this car in real life, I feel like it's accurately represented here in Forza. The Charger, and in general all muscle cars, were never meant to be full track spec race machines. They were built to deliver big V8 power in a daily driver that regular people can afford. Alright everyone, thank you for watching this review of the Charger SRT Hellcat. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.